We're going to go over workbook pages 38 through 41. Now these should actually already be done. We're going to go over them together. So you're using this on page 39. You're using the picture on page 38 to fill in the chart on 39. So you're giving evidence that you see in the picture. You're using your background knowledge, and you're making an inference about what happened to the steak. So what do you see in the picture? Well, hopefully you saw that a steak was missing. You see a dog underneath the table asleep. He looks pretty happy. He's drooling all over the place. And there's a bone right there next to him. What do you know about dogs? Well, I used to have a dog. They like to eat human food. Steaks was one of their favorite things to eat. Also, not just about dogs, but anybody, usually after they eat, after anybody eats, you have a nice full tummy. Nothing's better than a nap after a nice full tummy. So, probably what happened was the dog stole the guy's steak and ate it. So let's look at this chart here. Now, are you going to have the exact same thing? Maybe, maybe not. So, a boy's wondering where his steak was. A dog's on the floor below the table. The dog's asleep and he looks happy and is drooling. And there's a bone next to the dog. Alright, that's all things we saw from the picture. What do you know? Dogs eat meat, and that includes steak. An animal that eats too much can get sleepy, yes. It's unclear what else in the picture could have possibly taken away the meat. So we talked about these two when we looked at the picture. We didn't say this, but that is true. I mean, if the boy didn't eat the meat, there's nothing else in the picture besides the dog that could have. So that's a very good background knowledge that I didn't think about. And then the inference, I think the dog ate the steak. The dog probably ate it. So you can't really share and talk with a partner like it says below. If you have parents at home, you could share and talk with them. But since we're not in a class, you really can't share and talk with a partner. Now we're going to go to our next story. So the story about Zheng He, well, I'm not going to read this to you. You should have already read it, and you should have answered the questions on the following page. But I do want to point out these closed read habits. You should do these every time they have a suggestion, or it's actually directions here. You need to do them. It says, when you read the biography, circle words that tells the roles Zheng He played, and underline evidence of how his travels might have changed the world. So the roles he played should have been circled. He was a commander, a soldier, a sailor, a diplomat, leader of his fleet, a military man, a sailor again. And diplomat circled down here. You might not know what a diplomat is, so it actually gave you the definition of a diplomat. Then it asked you to underline evidence of how his travels might have changed the world. Well, the ship sailed the Indian Ocean, visiting ports along the lands we know as Indonesia, India, and Africa. He was speaking with foreigners on the behalf of the Chinese government. He represented the government politely. He wasn't rude. His fleet came to trade, not to conquer. That's all he wanted to do, was trade with people. When they left Chinese shores, the treasure boats were heavy with silk and porcelain and jade, because they wanted to trade. They wanted to give some of their Chinese culture and get some other cultures back in return. Zheng He took China out into the world, and he brought the world back to China. So now we're going to fill in the chart to make an inference about how Zheng He affected the world's knowledge of China. So what evidence is in the text? Well, he was the commander of the mightiest fleet the world ever saw. A fleet is a group of boats, by the way. He was not just a soldier and a sailor, but he was also a diplomat. The fleet came to trade, not to conquer. So he wasn't there to start war and to take over the world. He just wanted to trade with people. And then he took 7 voyages along the coast of Africa and Asia over almost 30 years. Now, what do we know about these things? Well, you might not have known what a diplomat was, but it did tell you on the bottom of page 40 what it was. So this is actually the second clue here, but it says diplomats are people who visit other places and talk with other people. So that is very important to understand what a diplomat is. It's not somebody who wants to conquer and take over the world. And you might have gotten confused because he was also a commander, not just a diplomat. And sometimes commanders do lead armies to take over things. A person who does everything the text describes must have had some effect on the world. Well, absolutely. He did a lot of things and traveled all over the place, and he did it for 30 years. I mean, he had to have some effect on the world if he's doing all this traveling all over these places for this long. Trade is an activity that leads people to learning about each other. So he's, in the text, something we underlined was that his ships were filled with silk and porcelain and jade. So he had things that his country was known for, and he was bringing them to other countries to offer them and say, hey, look what we have. You can use our silks for clothes and things, and you can use our jade as jewelry. What do you have? What can we bring back to our country to use in our country the way that you use it here? So you should have inferred something similar. It doesn't have to be the exact same. None of this has to be the exact same, but it should be something similar. The world's knowledge of China probably increased because of Zheng He's travels. Absolutely, the world's knowledge had to increase. I mean, he's traveling for 30 years and he's taking parts of China with him wherever he goes, and that's all he wanted to do. He wanted to trade and learn and spread his culture. He didn't want to take over the world and rule anybody. Now, if you have a parent, you can talk about what you did in your chart with your parent. If you don't have a parent there, or if they're not with you right this second, that's fine because we kind of talked about it together. But the short response down here, this is something that some students skipped last week. You can't skip the short response. The short response is basically taking what you put in this graphic organizer and writing it in paragraph format. That is important. Part of your state testing, if you get to take one this year, is going to be a writing piece. So they give you a prompt and you have to answer it. This is a writing prompt, and your answer, this would be how you organize your answer, and then you would write it in paragraph form. So let's take a look at a sample answer. So a sample answer would be, Zheng He probably greatly increased the world's knowledge about China. For example, in 1405, Zheng He commanded the mightiest fleet the world had ever seen. The mighty fleet told the world of China's naval might. In addition, Zheng He was not just a soldier and a sailor, but also a diplomat. This means that Zheng He spoke for the Chinese government when meeting foreigners. And because his fleet came to trade, not to conquer, people thought Asia and Africa probably learned more about China through its goods. For all these reasons, Zheng He probably greatly increased the world's knowledge about China. So we started with our inference and ended with our inference. And we cited text-based evidence. That's why they have quotation marks here. That means this is not the author's, this is straight from the text. Okay, so, you can't usually copy text. If you put it in quotation marks, you can, because you're giving that other person credit for it. If you don't give the other person credit for it, it's called plagiarism. But anytime you answer a question to a prompt, you always want to cite text-based evidence. From the text said, blah, 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 blah. Or you can just put it in quotation marks, because then we will know that you're quoting text. If you have questions about making inferences, you can email me, and make sure that you have watched your word study video and worked on iReady for at least 15 minutes today.